Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications.
The Pew Research Center is one of the most respected polling organizations in the world. One reason: it's a not-for-profit. It's not a for-profit business. It's funded by trusts set up by long-deceased members of an oil-rich family. So they spend a lot of money on their polls, and they're good. Today they released Race in America 2019. They polled over 6,600 adults, 6 times the number usually represented in polls. The headlines: Americans have negative views of the country's racial progress. Surprise, surprise. More than half say Trump has made race relations worse. Again, a surprise. Drilling down, here are their key findings. 49% of white people and 73% of black people believe that Trump has made race relations worse. 37% of white people and 78% of black people believe our country hasn't gone far enough in giving blacks equal rights with whites. 56% of white people and 71% of black people believe race relations in the United States are generally bad. 58% of white people and 84% of black people believe the legacy of slavery affects the position of black people in American society today a great deal or a fair amount. 7% of white people and 50% of black people believe it is not too likely or not likely at all that black people will eventually have equal rights. 65% of people believe it's become more common for people to express racist or racially insensitive views, while 29% believe it's about as common as ever, and 5% believe it's less common. 45% of people believe it's more acceptable for people to express racist views or racially insensitive views, while 31% believe it's about as acceptable as it's always been, and 23% believe it's less acceptable. Here's another surprise, y'all. Compared to President Barack Obama, most people, by a 2-to-1 margin, think Trump has made race relations worse. So y'all stunned about any of that? You know, Cleo, you study all this stuff and you talk about it a lot. This poll seems to be stating pretty much the obvious. The one thing that strikes me is the gap between what white folks think and what black folks think. It's like we don't even live in the same country.
Well, you may remember the polls that came out. Several polls came out after the Michael Brown murder in Missouri. Well, and that was after Trayvon, and that was after Tamir. And white people still say that they felt pretty good about police behavior in this country, right, even in the wake of all these murders. And black people, obviously, it looked just like these polls right here in terms of the difference in perspective. Yeah. And like I said before, one group looks at the group as protecting them, that's the white folks, and doing their due diligence to make sure that they stay powerful and stay the most honored group in this country. And the other group is the victims, if you will, of the police system. And so this is the same thing. But one thing I want to say real quickly is that I think it's tragic that black people are still depending on white people for equal rights. I don't believe we should have white people determine our rights. We should just do what we need to do. Now, I know there's you know, things similar to redlining and there's gentrification and all these things, but we could gentrify our own communities if we weren't dealing with self-hate crimes.
Well, and also there is a wealth gap, Cleo, that really does, I mean, if we look at the gentrification issue, which we're going to talk about later on, but the wealth gap is very significant when we talk about what we could do for ourselves. I agree with you that we should not be depending on white folks to do anything, but there are laws that discriminate against us. There are structures that make it more difficult. We'll talk about some of that later in the show about education and other things. So while, you know, I love the way your brain works, and we agree most of the time, but And I don't believe in asking white folks. I'm James Brown. You know, open up the door and I get it myself. But I think that the way the poll is looking is really looking at the distribution of stuff. To me, distributional issues.
But I'll be quick because I know my brother has some wonderful things to say.
I
went from rats and roaches to a life that has, relatively speaking, some level of means. And I know what I did to do that. And I ain't no superhero special person. Anybody can do it. So that's another show. And I am real clear about white supremacy and racism. I mean, it's something I talk about all the time, yeah, with it being a big problem. But I still say a bigger, more immediate problem is internalized oppression and black people having taken on a white supremacist self-concept. And when we get over that, we'll be better off as a people.
I agree with you. I mean, but if you swim in racist water, some of that racism is going to you're going to ingest some of it. So we're racist, or we have been racially affected. I won't say we're racist, but we've been affected by the racism. We have basically inhaled some of our negative self-concept. Inhaled, you know, some of when Eva opened up by starting and talking about what Thomas Jefferson said about our people. I mean, those stereotypes have been with us for a very long time. But let me get you in here. Your boy is seen as responsible for the worsening of race relations. I know you disagree.
I do too.
Yeah, I mean, I do, and it, for real, you know, it actually doesn't really surprise me. I would be interested to see what the numbers were, you know, how Americans felt about race relations when Bush was in office. I would be
they worse.
Yeah, well, I would be interested in seeing those numbers. Chances are that, you know, they may not be as large or the gap as wide as it is now under Trump, but I would imagine that under a Republican president, those numbers are pretty much the same. We shouldn't be surprised that there are white people who don't want to deal with the elephant in the room. Condoleezza Rice has talked about the elephant in the room. Colin Powell has talked about the elephant in the room. Racism exists.
White supremacy, though.
White supremacy exists. You know.
Oh, so y'all agree? Why y'all agree on something? This is a good time for me to take a break. These brothers are agreeing. Y'all write this down.
No, I said that. No, he mentioned the elephant room, and I said they were riding the elephant. I'm not necessarily completely agreeing with them.
All right, we're going to a break.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Calling all HBCU alumni, students, and leaders. Enter the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement their proposal. The deadline to apply has been extended to April 15, 2019. Go to fgb.life for more information and to apply. Ford goes further in our community.
Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.